Good evening. Good to see everybody here tonight. Chris stole the other third that we had last week. Not that we're not happy to have him back, but it's kind of not fair, but it's all right. Good to have everybody that's here. Let's go ahead and start off with a prayer. Our dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we're truly grateful for this day that you've given this evening that we have to open our Bibles, the Old Testament, Lord, to look at Proverbs and look at the words from Solomon and the wisdom that he learned from you, Lord, and the experiences that we can apply in our lives every day. We're truly grateful for the blessings that you've afforded each one of us, Lord, just for the ability to be here. We're mindful of those that are not able to be here tonight, many of our own number, many that we still continue to pray for every day. Help us not to take them for granted. Help us to take account for those that are missing. Help us in our walk, Lord, to open our Bibles, our hearts, and our minds, to look at the words that we're studying tonight, to help one another with our walk, Lord. We know that we all need help. Help us to build each other up and not tear each other down, Lord. We know we all struggle with so many different things, not only in our physical lives, but in our spiritual lives. We know that your word and its truth and its purity is there to help us in our walk. Guide us and direct us in your words and in your steps. It's through your Son's name we pray these things. Jesus the Christ, amen. All right, tonight we are going to talk about pride. Thought this was going to be my last lesson tonight. It might be, we're not sure exactly what's going to happen. I got a text from Chris and I were talking last night, and so now I know why Kyle decided to do the first 2 months. Good job. Well played. So, it just ends up being one of those months where we have extra weeks and stuff. So, I'm not sure if I'll be here or not as far as teaching. We'll see. I think an extra bag of coffee is in order, don't you think, Kyle? No, I'm just kidding. But I'm not sure if I'm going to be teaching another Proverbs or not. Possibly. See how tonight goes. But pride is obviously something I don't think I need a lot of introduction for. I think it's something, no matter what your walk is, no matter where you've been, I think it's something we all struggle with on a day-to-day basis. I think it's something that we all deal with. I think as individuals, male and female, it's something that's a stumbling block for all of us. And I think this is why there's different things in terms that we're going to look at in Proverbs that overlap. Different things that are talked about in the Proverbs we're going to look at tonight that overlap with things we've already talked about. First thing that it talks about, that which proceeds out of a man, that is what defiles a man. What are the things that we defile ourselves with all the time? In today's age, I could stand here all night and talk about the things that defile each one of us and not even come close to making a dent in each of the things that cause us to stumble. Because we all have different things that cause us to stumble. That's why this book is so relevant and the words from Solomon are so relevant. Because there are so many different things that we stumble with each time we sin. Some of the things that we look at are high opinion of ourselves. I think one of the things I think of when I think about this is, we talked about this in several classes before. Social media, I think, has taken this to a whole new level. Because people have now a platform to be able to exploit ways and opportunities of, sometimes in not the best way, of themselves, right? Of seeing themselves in a way that we never could before. Before, it was maybe in public or whatever, but now we have the internet that allows us to see that in many different ways. In that, we have the ability of seeing conceit. So I have conceited up here. How many people do we know that have that as one of the things with pride? One of the definitions of pride is being conceited. People that we interact, maybe that's one of the things that is a fault. Maybe it's conceit. Maybe think a little bit higher of yourself than you should. Thankfully, we have the ability of people and the scriptures to put us right back in our place. Hand in hand with that is arrogance. That's definitely something that a lot of people stumble with, is having a little too much favor of themselves, walking around. Sometimes it's just really a party of one. Other people can see right through that in transparency. But the Bible helps us, thankfully, in this regard to not be prideful. And we're going to look at this verse in a little bit, but it talks about pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. And before I go on just a little bit further, I just want to, kind of pose this question. This is obviously a very well talked about verse. It's a verse we bring up a lot when we talk about pride. Why do you think that this verse is put in this sentence structure, that it talks about pride goes before destruction and the haughty spirit before a fall? Just looking for some feedback on that. I've always been interested in that, but there's a reason that there's an order in the sentence structure, but curious about some feedback on that. Anybody? Paul?
Sometimes it's easy to think, well, maybe the Bible doesn't quite mean what it says. And so oftentimes, like in this, God will just say it two different ways or say two very similar things side by side. So it's, I kind of feel pretty proud of myself, but the Bible says that goes before destruction. Maybe that's not exactly what it means. No, that's what it means.
Okay. So, haughty spirit, don't you think we could have a haughty spirit and that could cause us to have destruction? So I could have a haughty spirit and that caused me to have the destruction before I fall, right? But I feel like we have that pride first. I mean, like you said, I think there's a definite reason pride is there first. I think there's a reason. I mean, obviously, there's the wisdom behind all of this. I really, if you replace any of the words that are on the screen, I really think that it really answers the question pretty legitimately. In the times that I've thought that I was smarter than I really was, I can fill in the blanks in many home projects or I think I know better than you ideas, and almost inevitably, all of those fill the blank. Any of the times I didn't seek someone's counsel or I thought I knew the answer, the question before I really did, the destruction or the leak or something explosive happens, it's because I didn't really know exactly what I was doing. And that's where the prideful part of my personality came out. And I should have, and we're going to talk about this a little bit further, and that's where I should have sought counsel. So how do we struggle with our pride? This is definitely an open-ended question. So I should not have too many blank stares on this. And I have a chart back there I'll talk about in a little bit. But how do you struggle with your pride?
I think a big ego is a symptom of pride because I've worked with many people that have an enlarged ego.
Okay, how do we get that?
It's so obvious. It's like a blinking light.
So do you see that, or is that people? I feel like there are people that don't see that. It's obvious to many. Some people don't see that, but how do you see that? What are signs that you see that help you see that blinking light?
Well, I worked with lawyers, so I'll say I saw it with lawyers.
I've worked with lawyers too, so I can completely understand that. Kyle?
I'm wondering if you're asking about nature versus nurture. Some people are predisposed to having a high opinion of themselves, but others, we can sometimes get it because things go right a lot, or we've made good decisions and it turns out well, and so then you get a high opinion of yourself because, oh, well, I've done things right, or I made a good choice here, or I've done things good here. And then you start thinking, well, if I thought it, it must be right because I'm usually right. And then that's what we got to be cautious of.
I like that, nurture versus nature. Yeah. Tony?
Another answer maybe to a question that I think I hear you asking is that, and I'm like Mary, I don't have a problem with my ego, but what I need is somebody to show me. I need someone to tell me. So I need someone that is actually honest with me and telling me that you're acting self-centeredly, your ego is in the way, the things that you're doing are prideful. And so a lot of times I can't really see it, or I don't see it myself, and I need somebody to tell me.
Typically your spouse, right? Where is Terry Lynn? That is true. And if a lot of times we don't have an offset, that's a lot of times where that blinking light, as Mary said. And an attorney is a great, I'll use that as an example because of, I think, in that instance, having worked in the legal industry for over 15 years, I don't anymore, but I did, and they're so used to the black and the white of the law and seeing things as black and white, they do get the predisposition of only knowing one way. And I think knowing that something so well, I think that's where they do have that kind of arrogance, that there's only one way and I'm right and you're wrong. So I definitely can see that kind of attitude. And I also like Kyle's, the nature, you say nature versus nurture, right? Some people just have that kind of luck, I think. So when things do naturally go their way more times than not, it's easy for them to think, well, that's the way it is for everybody. When it doesn't go right for you, that's just your luck. This chart on the, sorry, it's not as easy to see. On the left column, it says thoughts and beliefs of humility. On the heart, it says God and others. It says consider others better than myself. That's obviously, that's the heart we should have. What does that produce? It produces joy, fulfillment, and peace. And then it says my life is to reflect God's glory, which gives us reconciliation, contentment, thankfulness, and having an attitude that it's not about me gives you thankfulness and how can I serve others. And that's open and a heart soft toward God. Just that kind of attitude that we're supposed to have, which seemingly sounds pretty easy, right? But if you have a prideful heart, it doesn't always come across, or it doesn't allow us to be easy. That's not an easy task for us to encounter. And that, again, brings our servitude to others. You know, some of the times I've talked to people that, you know, I know do things behind the scenes, but a lot of times you kind of wonder, well, what does this person or that person do? It's not our place, right, to ask people what they're doing for other people. But we sometimes get ahead of ourselves and may ask, well, what is that person doing for that person? What is our servitude to others? What are we doing for other people? Are we that self-centered? Are we doing things for other people? It's putting ourselves behind other people. Having that lowest seat, as Chris always is talking about, which then puts us in that seat of humility. How are we having that humility and that kind of heart to have, you know, that lowest seat? You know, a good example is trying, you know, noticing when we have a gathering and stuff. Where are you in that? You know, this doesn't always play. I know if you have small kids and stuff, you feed them first. But, you know, where are you in that potluck line? Are you pushing the old people out of the way to get your plate first? I mean, again, it's just having that kind of heart of helping other people and trying to get past that pride of the self-centric. And I think that's where we kind of lose focus sometimes as Christians. You know, the world around us is not begging us to be putting them before ourselves. They're looking at, this is a me world. So Proverbs talks about that a lot. And this is what I like about this particular topic. All right, let's go ahead and jump into Proverbs chapter 6. We're going to jump into hate after all of that. That's great, right? Proverbs chapter 6, verses 16 and 17. There are 6 things the Lord hates, 7 that are an abomination to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood. So we know that after talking about what we've just talked about, we know that there are the things that God hates. Whoops, I just lost my connection here. One of which is a lying tongue and haughty eyes. So how is it that, what are our haughty eyes? If you were to describe somebody, it's not a term that we use often anymore. You just have haughty eyes. What is that? What are haughty eyes? Okay. Looking down on somebody, thinking that you're better than them. Arrogance, which is what we're been talking about. Great. Proud. Very proud. Okay. How do we get this way? I kind of keep coming back to that, but as Christians, go ahead.
I think we have a saying that says that it's not bragging if it's true. And I think that to a certain extent we have bought into that gives us a free pass to promote ourselves. And if we think we're right, we think that gives us the right to elevate ourselves. And I think that is where pride comes in. At least I know for me. Because I think I'm right, I feel like I can look down on you because you're wrong, and you need me to show you what's right. And it's hard sometimes for me to do that in a way that is humble.
And that's where the humility comes in. Just because you have something to say and you think that you're right, there's a way of saying it, right? You can say the same thing to someone in a different tone and get the same point across without saying it in a tone that would be in a haughty way, and get the same point across, and with wisdom and humility. Thank you, Tony. Yes, sir.
When I read this list of characteristics, it's pretty easy to see that these are the opposite of God's character. And this is Satan's character. And he is the epitome of this idea of pride. But he didn't get that way because of success. He didn't get that way because of all the great things that happened to him. He got that way because he didn't get what he wanted. He was jealous, he was envious, and he wanted this position, and he could never get there. And I think this is where, to answer your prior question, this is something that Christians struggle with too. I want to be in this position. I want my reputation to be this. I want to be seen as like this. And if I don't get it, then I'm going to do everything I can in my power. It may be that I'm going to look down on others. I'm going to lie about it. I'm going to cheat about it. I'm going to shed innocent blood. Whatever it is to get where I want to be, because I'm so full of myself. I don't have it, but I want it. And I don't want to ask for help either. I mean, that's the one thing I struggle with. I don't struggle with pride, but I struggle with not asking for other people for help. And I think that's what it all comes down to, is we get so, and the devil does too, he gets so full of himself that it's like everything you can do, and that's where he gets us here. He wants us to be just like him. He doesn't want us to have those godly characteristics.
Yep.
He couldn't have all those things from the very beginning. And so he doesn't want us to have them either. And he wants us to be full of ourselves so that we can be in there with him.
Very good point. And I think this doesn't stop just you didn't just learn this. This is something you were taught. And we have to teach our kids this, that, I can't speak for those in school now. Sorry, I see that that's overlapped. But, we have to teach our kids this now for them to be successful Christians, that they can't have those kind of lying tongues. They can't have the haughty eyes, being deceitful and wicked. That's what that says. I apologize. It was fine earlier. They have to be so what that says is, across from lying tongue, it says deceitful, wicked, not trustworthy. Christians are to be trustworthy. We're supposed to be able to rely on one another. We're supposed to be who we go to for one another for trust and loyalty, that Jonathan was talking about. If we don't have that kind of reputation to be sought out in public eye, you never know who knows who. What's the 6 points of separation? You don't ever know who you know that knows each other. How many of us have gone across the country and ran into someone that knows of you or knows someone, whether that's not even in worship. I've ran into people. I've been to Disneyland and ran into my next door neighbor, didn't know that they were even going to Disneyland at the same time. You never know who you're going to see and when you're going to see them. But we're supposed to be able to know one another. What that song I always think about, knowing in each other's sigh. We're supposed to know each other. And what do we learn from this? Is God is loving, but he hates sin, and he doesn't overlook it. He always is going to know when we're sinning. But what is the one thing that we know that we can count on with him? He's going to forgive us. So I put this on here, any New Testament examples of ideas of any people that you can think of that reminds you of this kind of behavior? Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, Ken.
Tax collector and the Pharisee.
Exactly what I was thinking of. You want to expound on that a little bit?
Luke, we found that what, in Luke 18.
Okay.
I think what, put my glasses on. 13 and 14, it's called telling the parable of the tax collector, the Pharisee standing there, and I'm not like this, and I'm not like that. And the tax collector basically says, forgive me for I'm not even worthy of that.
Absolutely. All of this is exactly applicable today. Tony and then Kyle.
Whatever it takes. And Ananias and Sapphira were willing to cheat the Lord in order to look good in front of other Christians.
It's all sometimes, and even now we're about appearances, aren't we, Kyle?
Think of Peter, and because he came from humble beginnings, being a fisherman, but when Paul had to chastise him for siding with the Jews, there was pride there, and to my point, it was nurtured because he was elevated to this position of leadership and being one of Jesus's apostles and preaching that first sermon, and then that builds up, and you think, okay, so I have some clout here. When I speak, there's something behind it. And he let that get the best of him. I don't think he intended to. I don't think anybody sets out to say, oh, I'm going to have a problem with pride. But that's why we all got to be so careful, because and that's why we're warned so often about it.
Very good. Thank you. Randy?
Demonstrated pride when they wanted to have a higher position in Jesus's circle than they needed.
You want to expound on that?
I mean, they didn't get it. They didn't understand what Jesus was about, and they wanted to be elevated. They
Right.
They didn't want to be the last in the line. They wanted to be next to Jesus. They wanted to be on his right side, and
That was very prideful too. Yeah. Thank you. All right, let's move on to Proverbs chapter 8, verse 13. Hopefully the next slide isn't overlapped. Proverbs chapter 8, verse 13. The fear of the Lord is hatred of evil, pride and arrogance in the way of evil, and perverted speech I hate. What do you think about this particular word, the word fear here? Do you think it means panic or terror? It's respect, right? Yeah, it's more of an implication of respect, like you said. I think oftentimes when we think about fearing God, we forget about that particular way. The way that this word is particularly translated implies that fear. I put that example, I believe, of fear. Or maybe I didn't put it up there, but it's like fire. You're not necessarily always afraid of it. There's a respect. You're not going to go near it, but you know it's there. You're not going to put your hands in it, but you know that it will burn you if you touch it. And that's what this verse talks about. It's something that we need to be aware of. It's also, the fear that we're supposed to have is supposed to be submissive. Do you want your children to fear you in this regard? Absolutely. You want them to be in a submissive but not a fearful, right? And one of the words I think is honor, right? You want to honor them in a way that they look at you, but you don't want fear and trembling. I mean, no parent wants that. I mean, if they backed into the car maybe or something, there should be a little fear there. But there is a level, because what is the connection between this kind of fear in the respect? You're talking about Martha. What do you think?
Well, it's if you respect God, you're going to do what he asks you to do. You're going to want to please him. You're going to glorify him if you respect him.
Absolutely. And there's the love, right? Because you're doing all of that because of the love that you have. So whether or not there is that fear, I can think of a few times that one of the boys did something and they came to me. More times than not, I found out, but some of the times that I found out that they did something and they came to me, they were worried. They weren't worried that they were going to I was going to spank them that bad or anything, but there was love, there was respect, and sure, I was mad, but the love still was bidirectional. Sometimes I had to walk in the other room and find myself and come back because of whatever it was, but there was still, that's the kind of love that we're supposed to have, and this verse talks about is that kind of fear. And we're supposed to hate evil. And that the fear to fear the Lord is to hate evil. I hate pride and arrogance. And I just think these Proverbs that we're looking at tonight, it just reiterates how much God hates this type of behavior. He hates us to be so boastful. I just picture, someone that just walks around with their chest out all the time and just so puffed up and so about themselves so much. I mean, I'm sure you can probably picture that kind of persona of someone that just think of them and you think, man, really? They only see themselves that way, right? And I just feel bad for that kind of person because they see themselves that way. And maybe that's good in a way that they feel that good and confident, but God doesn't like that kind of pride, and God doesn't like that kind of arrogance.
God to be disappointed in us, and we don't want to disappoint him because of the love we have for him and the fear and the respect.
Amen.
We want them to honor us because they love us, and we don't want to disappoint them, and we don't want to be disappointed in them.
That's true. Very good point. Very good point. Thank you. All right. Proverbs chapter 11, verse 2. When pride comes, then comes disgrace, but with the humble is wisdom. So this verse really talks about that second attribute, which is humility. I think this is interesting. How can humility be shared with pride so evenly? Or is it even in this verse? I'm going to read the verse one more time. When pride comes, then comes disgrace, but with the humble is wisdom. So that word humble in there, it's talking about humility. Am I wrong? Is this word not talking about humble and humility? Yes.
Thinking about just raising kids, and we want in our society we have the extreme of social media where people do promote themselves. We also have a current situation where there's a lot of suicides because people are so depressed and they have no pride. And so there's this balance that you're trying to instill upon your kids to feel confident in the things they're going to do so that they can shine their light. But then at the same time, it's kind of like David. he gave God the glory. And I don't know, there's just this fine line between humility and trying to find that balance of pride and being humble and giving the honor and the glory to the right person, which would be God, and teaching our kids to know that the things that they have, the talents they have, come from God and not through themselves and not through, I don't know. I don't know if that makes sense what I'm saying, but there is a struggle there that I think we do have to carry ourselves with confidence and teach our kids to carry themselves with confidence, but also to be seeking and looking around for those that don't have confidence and to show them where they get that confidence from. That's through Jesus.
No, that's really good because it shows the balance. It's not, they didn't get it from themselves or by themselves. It was given to them.
And letting them know where, anyway.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Well,
Pride, they talk about consequences, and sometimes people who are super arrogant don't think the rules apply to them, and they don't think about consequences. They don't think there are going to be any consequences, bad consequences for their actions. And that, to me, that's what this is saying. If you're prideful, the consequences are not going to be beneficial. But if you're more humble, then you're going to be wise and be able to have good consequences and not bad consequences.
I see that too. Leah?
Along with that, with humble comes wisdom. When I think of somebody humble, I'm thinking of somebody that is not so worried about being heard. They're the one that's observing, they're taking it in, they're listening, they're watching, and with that, we gain wisdom, just like when it says to be still. And so with that, silence.
Yeah, that's very good. And I was thinking of the characteristics typically of someone that has that humility. Typically, the pride is not an issue because they found their place of, unfortunately, I think a lot of times people that have a lot of humility can sometimes be perceived as being weak. And we know David and Goliath in that story. Not that because of his stature, obviously he wasn't. But, if you, in today's society, someone that might have a lot of humility may have that perception that they may walk around as someone that doesn't have, the stature or the persona of having as much pride. But we know, what does God give grace to the, I just lost my train of thought. How does thank you. That's the one. But we know better. That's what Christ looks for in our heart. Have that humility. So I just think this verse is kind of, it's not counterintuitive, but in a way it is, because that's not really the way that we think intuitively for us to think about these two words being tied together in one sentence. And I think that's why this verse is kind of striking in a way, because of the way it pairs itself well together. All right, any more on that? Yes.
Observation. Really, the characteristic of a fool is someone who doesn't learn or doesn't pay attention to the things that are around them. And the proud person is that person. They know all the answers. They have all the answers, and so they don't take in any more information because they've got it all worked out. And you see that throughout the book of Proverbs, how that folly is just not in tune with wisdom, and pride is really a manifestation of folly.
Very good. If we get there, I think part of that is seeking counsel. Thank you, Tony. All right, chapter 13, verse 10. Where there is strife, there is pride, but wisdom is found in those who take advice. You ever been around that person where you start a conversation and say, can I offer you some advice? Like, no, I'm good. I don't need any of that advice. Man, that's the most frustrating thing. I mean, it could be just that your tire's flat and they'll just go ahead and drive away with a flat tire. They're that kind of person. I think we've all been around that kind of scenario. But there's different versions that talk about this. One of the versions that I listed up there talk about insolence. The ESV talks about that, which talks about the Hebrew verb meaning to boil, which, strife. That really kind of puts it in a different perspective, doesn't it? Like, it's that angering that it, like, that's the amount of strife that it makes you, have you ever been in that kind of situation where you're that angry that it's, I can feel that. I've been there before. But by insolence comes nothing but strife, but with those who take advice is wisdom. That's kind of just like, it just eases everything, if you're able to take advice, but with those who take advice is wisdom. How hard is it to stand back and let someone just give you a little tidbit of help? I was with a gentleman yesterday, and I'd been out in the sun, and I was cutting his yard for him and stuff, and I didn't know why. I've just barely met the guy, and he said, I don't know how old you are, but can I give you some advice? And I thought, oh boy, this could be just a gamut of different things. And so you might want to I was out there for 4 hours, and he said, you might want to wear a hat the next time you come out here. And he was right. I had been out there for 4 hours, didn't even think about wearing a hat, ran out the door and cut his grass and stuff. And I got home, and he was absolutely right. My head was pretty hot and pretty burned. But, it's taking advice just from anyone. Does it hurt us? Especially those that are older than us, that he was telling me he'd had several surgeries from sun, cancer and this kind of thing. And who am I to say, no, I'm good. I have no skin cancer in my family. My mom's dad had skin cancer in places, right? Several places. That's the first person I should listen to about that kind of thing. But we oftentimes just scoff. We think about knowing too much, like Tony was talking about, and we just kind of overturn what people say and just don't listen. And unfortunately, that's again where we, as Christians, are. I think we're all guilty of such things. But this is saying that if we have strife, we just I'm sorry. I kind of pose this as a question. And again, my text overwrote itself, but it says, so is this saying that if we have strife, we need to ask someone for advice? I think yes, absolutely. We have people to the left and to the right of us that we can ask advice for at any given time. But do we take that as part of our day-to-day? We have ways of texting by email, social media. We have a Facebook page that we all, most of us, are able to ask advice on. There's lots of different things that I've seen on there that are not necessarily. I'd asked for advice on a sprinkler system, and I meant to post it to my HOA, and I sent it to everybody, all 1,400 people, my Facebook friends, and got lots of advice. So I know it works. Talking about an old person move, my kids were like, really? It was supposed to be for Garden Valley, but so I know you can ask advice whether you want it or not. I hadn't done that in a while, but it doesn't hurt to get all of the different advice that you need, and Solomon tells us that. But where I think where we as Christians forget is, again, this is for us to use to not create that folly that Tony was talking about, that we don't get to that place.
Think about this particular verse that's really, really powerful is whenever you get in a fight, whenever you get in an argument, when you have some kind of disagreement with a friend or a neighbor, there's pride involved. And if you're in an argument, you probably should reassess your heart.
Very good.
There is pride.
Randall?
Yes, ma'am.
At this point, usually when a husband and wife get into an argument, pride is the center of it. You can't come to an agreement.
That is true. That is true. I think that's a good way to end the class right there. Just words of wisdom right there. All right, I think we are actually out of time. Thank you, everybody.
If you'd like to follow along with me for just a few minutes, I would like to look at some passages at the end of the book of Joshua, working into the first chapter or two of the book of Judges. There is a congregational and online Bible read that we talk about here and keep posted in the back that takes us through a New Testament chapter every day and an Old Testament chapter. And the Old Testament read was finishing up Joshua and moving into Judges today. And so I want to talk about that for just a moment. Sawyer LaPrade was scheduled to do the talk tonight, and he got caught up at work and was unable to be here. And so I'm here to share just a few thoughts with you, and he'll fill back in as soon as he can be here and can do it. This is the end of Joshua's life, and he gathers, chapter 24, verse 1, all of the tribes of Israel to a location called Shechem. And it's been a great 7 years. They have conquered so much of the land of Canaan. God has been with them at every turn. They have now divided up that land among the nations, and things are very, very good, and it's time for Joshua to go. And what he does in the first 13 verses, we won't read those, but in chapter 24, verses 1 through 13, he reminds them of all of the good things that God has done. And I want you to please remember that statement. He reminded them of the goodness of God throughout their history. There's some names that pop up here. He mentions in verse 3, he took Father Abraham to the land of Canaan. He mentions Isaac and Jacob and Esau. In verse 5, he mentions Moses and Aaron and the plagues and the deliverance and the Red Sea and the Egyptians being washed away. He protected them even during the days of Balaam, trying to work with Balak against them. Verse 11, they came to Jericho. They marched around the city what ended up being 13 times, and God just kept helping them. He's been blessing them all throughout these days. And the instruction then for these people, as they finally enter into this place of rest, is fear the Lord, verse 14. Fear the Lord and serve him. Serve him in sincerity and truth. Put away the gods which your fathers served and just serve the Lord. And this is that famous line, choose for yourselves today whom you will serve. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And the people of God are adamant about one thing through the rest of this chapter. Do you guys remember what it was? We will totally serve the Lord. And Joshua said, I don't think you will. No, we will. We will never forget all the things that God has done, and we will sow that seed into our children, and we will follow God completely. And they are completely adamant. And Josh, I don't know, he saw some things we didn't see, because he said, look, just remember that you said that, because I'm telling you it's not going to go like you think. Well, we get a little bit of indication as to what happened when we get into the book of Judges. If you have not joined in our Old Testament reading, but you like blood and gore and civil war and chaos and general awfulness, then perfect day to start. Go home tonight and start. Judges was terrible. It was a terrible time for God's people, because God was against them much of the time, and they were against him first. But in Judges and in chapter 1, there are two things I want you to note. Just two things. One is found in chapter 1, verses 29 and following. And you saw this during the dividing and the conquest of the land. They would say, purge the land of idolatry and all of those things, and they would just let some people hang around. Not all the people. They would drive out nations and destroy cities. But Ephraim, verse 29, did not drive out the Canaanites. Zebulun did not drive out the inhabitants of Kitron. Asher, verse 31, did not drive out the inhabitants of Akko. Verse 33, Naphtali did not drive out the inhabitants of Beth-Shemesh. There was this constant part where instead of cleansing their lives of evil influences, they would keep a little bit of evil influence around. And for the most part, because those people were their servants, they thought it was fine. But that became one of their big problems. And as we finish tonight, there are two things I want you to think about. God has done many great things for us, and we want to be faithful, and we want our kids to be faithful, and we want to live a life in a healthy relationship with God. Warning number one in this story is be careful of keeping evil influences close and justifying it by saying it's a lot less than it used to be. Or I've mostly cleaned things up. I've mostly cleaned. Someone says, I've mostly cleaned up what I watch. I've mostly cleaned up what I say. I've mostly cleaned. God, the devil doesn't need most of the bad people in your life to draw you away. He just needs one. And so they kept just enough around. But that wasn't going to be, I don't think, enough to get them. But then there was something else. Judges chapter 2 and verse 6. When Joshua had dismissed the people, the sons of Israel went each to his inheritance to possess the land. The people served the Lord all the days of Joshua, all the days of the elders who survived Joshua, who had seen all the great work of the Lord which he had done for Israel. Then Joshua dies at 110. They buried him. Verse 10. Last verse. Well, verse 11. All that generation also were gathered to their fathers, and there arose another generation after them who did not know the Lord, nor yet the work which he had done for Israel. The sons of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord and served Baals. That was their second mistake. The ones who actually saw the parting of the Red Sea were faithful all their lives. I mean, how do you forget that? You saw the parting of the Red Sea. But their children did not see the parting of the Red Sea. What they were supposed to do was teach God's goodness and glory and power and blessings and protection so diligently to those kids that it was as if they themselves had walked through the Red Sea on dry land. But somewhere along the way, they had not invested in teaching of God and his presence to them. And so what does the math say? A generation rises up that's not particularly familiar with all the wonderful things that God has done. And we have left evil influences near us. It's not many, just a few, won't be a big deal. Terrible combination, and it led, verse 11, to that sin cycle. You guys know about the Judges' sin cycle? Sin and suffering and sorrowfulness and all these kinds of things. So I would just encourage you, Wednesday nights are great. Being here is great. Just studying together. But as a family at your home, please continually speak of the goodness of God. I would never stand against, all our curriculums are good. But just teaching them the books of the Bible or Bible stories is not enough. They need to know God. They need to know what God has done. And those stories are designed to demonstrate God. If we'll do those two things, if we will keep God fresh on our tongue and we'll teach these stories to our kids and to our family and our friends and make God real to them, and we will keep every influence that has the chance to delay us to the best of our ability, we'll push it away. We can raise up kids that are faithful, and that's what I want. And I know you want that too. So if we encourage you, if you say, God's not been on the forefront of my mind, or I've let those little influences, I kept them around and now they're getting me, you may go so far as to say you are one of those people, then redemption is what you need, and Christ gave his life so you could have it, so that you could be redeemed again, so that we could be his people. If you need anything, let us help you as we stand and sing.